Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Our Future 2025. I'm happy to be back again. Thanks to Matt inviting me, and always good to speak with you guys. I hope you guys are all staying safe. There's quite the events happening in California right now, including the me recovering from the plague, but also the fires. I hope you guys are all safe, um, and I hope all of your loved ones are also safe. All right, so today I'm going to speak about preventing common garden issues. This is something I almost did last time because I see a lot of people really struggle with some of these different, more simple concepts or just stuff that people run into regularly. Um, so we're going to talk about a bunch of different methodologies and solutions to your problems with some takeaways so you guys have some actionable recipes and things like that in order to move forward. And maybe even turn you on to some new products and some new concepts for how to better utilize some of the things that you're already utilizing in your garden for IPM, but as well as some other problems that people regularly run into. As you can see here, starting on going from left to right, you can see some bong aphids. Those are the type that particularly affect cannabis on the far left. In the middle here, you can see a cannabis plant pretty well infected with septoria. It is a very, very common problem in the Midwest and plains, as well as the tropics, if you're in Jamaica, Thailand, that type of thing. And then also you can see on the right, we have botrytis caused by caterpillars. So we're going to touch on a bunch of this. I know the initial slide here is mostly cannabis, but I assure you that everything we cover here will apply to vegetable plants as cannabis. A little bit about myself. I am the founder of Potent Ponics. I've had experience for 14 years in the legal side of the aquaponic cannabis grow game, as well as aquaponic vegetables, organic soil production, large scale soil production of crops, and a whole bunch of other fun things, as well as lots of tests and experimental growing of many different crops in aquaponics to try and determine, what is the best use for that particular technology. I trained all the first workers for the largest aquaponics cannabis facilities in Europe, Africa, and Asia, as well as Australia. So yeah, I've done quite a bit of work over the years. I was first aquaponic cannabis grow featured in High Times, whole bunch of other stuff. It's the first person to legally import cannabis seeds to Zimbabwe, and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. Yeah, we don't have to get into everything. If you do enjoy my content, though, be sure to check me out over on the Growing with Fishes podcast. We have a huge library of episodes, as well as the Aquaponic Cannabis Conference I put on a few years ago. Hopefully, we'll be back again doing that again here soon. I've had some family stuff that's kept me from doing it last year, but hopefully, we can get back into the swing of things this year. All right, so what are some of the common things that people struggle with? A lot of times, people get frustrated. Um, with different aspects in the garden, be it molds or powdery mildew or things like that, or insects or fertigation, not having the right minerals. We're going to kind of cover all those three different points in our presentation today, from nutrition to pest control to fungal controls. I'll try and give you guys some short and simple solutions for your garden. So first, we're going to talk about pH. Now, this is something that I see people really screw up a lot. A lot of people say, "Oh, you don't need to worry about pH, or soil will just be the right pH if you just do compost, or if I do sand beds, I don't need to worry about pH, or it doesn't matter that my compost tea slash ferment is a pH of 4. If I put it on my plants, it'll be fine, right? It won't affect, lots of different silly things like that where people don't realize that they're going to immediately burn the living crap out of their plants or cause nutrient lockout or create a soil solution that is widely outside of the range of what the planet is that they like. If I'm growing berries, raspberries, blueberries, that type of thing, those plants want a more acidic soil. But if I'm growing, other types of crops, they might want to have a more neutral or alkaline soil, depending on the crop's that you're selecting. So making sure that you know what pH range your particular crop is really aimed in at is going to help your plant succeed and thrive and give you the best production. In general, for soil and aquaponics, 6.4 to 6.8 is going to give you the best nutrient bioavailability for your crops. If you're doing hydro, you can aim a little bit lower. But in general, for soil and aquaponics, you're aiming for, 6.4 to 6.8. The other thing I hear people don't talk about enough is KH, or your dissolved carbonate hardness, which is basically the likelihood of your pH to change. If you're seeing big swings in your pH, and especially in an aquatic-based system, your KH is probably very low. The other thing I see very, very commonly, and people do not touch on this enough in the organic world, and it's something is the reason why I put this slide in this deck, is because I regularly see people cause tons of problems in their garden by putting very acidic solutions onto their plants in a plant that's already, in the sixes or pH wise, and then they'll put something that's like a 4 or a low 5 pH nutrient solution onto it, and it just immediately causes problems with the plant. And you really need to get your pH within 0.5 pH before you put it on your plant roots in order to not have issues. 0.3 or 0.2 is even better, but at the very least, bring your compost tea or compost extract, much closer to pH than you would, say traditionally or taught. So you want to make sure that you are, if your soil is 6.4, you wouldn't want your solution to be any less than 5.9. It's okay if it's higher. If you can bring it a little bit above that, that's cool. I personally prefer to use potassium silicate, even though it's not organic certified, in order to bring that pH up. If you wanted to go organic certified, I believe Montana Grow has a silica product that will raise your pH. But I found potassium silicate kind of gives you the best results for flowering crops, be it cannabis or tomatoes or peppers, for just adjusting that compost tea or microbial ferment back up in pH. All right. So for pH up, again, I'm a big fan of potassium silicate and calcium carbonate as kind of my go-tos. Maybe every second or third dose, I'll do potassium bicarbonate. Potassium bicarbonate, potassium carbonate are organically certifiable. Potassium silicate is not. I avoid hydroxides. They're very regularly pushed on hydro and aquaponic people, but they're way too much potential to overdose. And I personally don't know about you, but I don't like to use things in my garden that are not allowed on airplanes. And neither one of those chemicals are allowed in airplanes. So I think that's a pretty good rule. If it's ORMD, it is not for me. And here's a full list of things you can use to raise your pH. You can use calcium carbonate, calcium silicate, calcium chloride, calcium magnesium carbonate, potassium silicate, potassium carbonate, potassium bicarbonate. All of those are acceptable solutions for pH up. But again, I generally prefer the calcium carbonate, potassium silicate, and potassium bicarbonate kind of as the three go-tos above all the others because they do provide the most benefit to your plant growth for your average grower. pH down. So phosphoric acid is really good. You can get that in many different forms. Muriatic acid is another one used as pool pH down. Can be used safely if you're doing a larger pH adjustment. If you're doing an adjustment in a volume of water for either making tea or brewing a nutrient solution, you can also use CO2. Dry ice will crash out the pH, or injected CO2 can also lower the pH if you're wanting to do it in a way that's a little bit more natural. CO2 is perfectly fine. Just don't do it with anything living in the water, obviously, or you'll kill them. And then lactobacillus. Lactobacillus, when dosed at a 1 to 1,000 rate, will lower your pH 0.1 to 0.2, depending on the KH of the system at the time. So if your dissolved carbonate hardness is high, it'll lower it about 0.1. If your dissolved carbonate hardness is, in the middle of the road or lower, it'll lower it by about 0.2. So you're looking at 0.1 to 0.2 drop in pH for using lactobacillus, which a lot of you are familiar with Korean natural farming. We'll touch on that a little bit later in our section on fungal control. I do not use vinegar or citric acid. Citric acid is not very strong. Vinegar also has its own issues with water chemistry, that it can cause problems. You do occasionally see these suggested in very old aquarium books, but you should not be using them in your garden. pH down again, phosphoric acid's kind of the go-to. If you're doing a bigger adjustment, go with muriatic acid, because if you dose phosphoric acid all the way from like a 7.8 or an 8 down to a 6.8, you get so much phosphorus in the water that you can kind of create a phosphor buffer, and then that can cause problems with being able to lower the pH over time. It can kind of help prevent that. So you do want to be careful with that and not completely just rely solely on phosphoric acid. If you have large pH drops, it's not going to be the way to go. The other thing I wanted to mention with pH is if you are brewing a nutrient solution. So let's say I'm going to make a compost tea and I can lower the pH of the water to a 6.2, or I could leave the water at a 7 or a 7.2, um, in order to start my batch. Now, you want to use that 7.2 over the 6.2 because the 7.2 is going to have a lot more carbon in the water, a lot more dissolved carbon hardness in the water. So you're going to have a lot more building blocks for those microbes, to create new tissue and new structures, than you would at the lower pH where you have less carbon in the water. So that's why it's really important to have a higher pH, at the start of your tea, maybe even outside of the range that you want to. Most people want to do them in a 6.6 to 6.8 for their compost teas as a starting point. I disagree. You'll have a better microbial total count at the end of that same time period with a 7 or a 7.2 than you would at a 6.6 or 6.8 because of that, directly. And it's observable under the microscope if you look at it. All right, so pH testing, you got your probes, electronic probes. Make sure you recalibrate them once a month. I just reset everything on the first of every month. We just run around the lab, I run around the farm and, recalibrate all the probes. This way nothing drifts. They will drift on you over time if you don't regularly calibrate them. So recalibrate them. I know it's a pain in the butt sometimes and you got to go dig out the solution and blah, 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 blah. But, if it's off, especially on an automated controller, it'll really screw you up. So, and always double check them against the API test kits. If you think it's off, double check it. Those test kits are very accurate unless you freeze them. So, keep one of those on hand. They cost like $6. It's not even if you have a digital meter, just keep an API test kit on hand, a titration test, and just double check it once in a while because they will give you a false positive sometimes, with the digitals. And pH range is extremely important. As you can see here, 6 to 6.8 is the maximum bioavailability in the chart here for all of our nutrients. So for nitrogen and molybdenum and copper and zinc, boron, manganese, iron, magnesium, calcium, sulfur, potassium, phosphorus, you're going to have all of these in the maximum parts per million availability within that low 6 range, 6 to 6.8. So that's why we're aiming for that particular range with our nutrients. And you see lots of people be like, oh, well, I can just add lots of kelp or azomite or rock dust. Problem is with those products, after a while, you're going to build up a lot of heavy metals. Every single time I've seen a cannabis farm fail for arsenic, it's traced back to a kelp extract. People overusing things like MaxiCrop or overusing powdered seaweed products or azomite or rock dust. Um, that's what's causing these issues. And remember, azomite and rock dust are not mined for garden application. They are mining byproducts from mining metal ore. So don't put them in your garden. Like, yeah, it's cool, like to be organic and try to like do that, but you're way better off with plant ferments where you can control them much more and know what the heck is going on. Plants will, to a lesser, depending on what type of plant, have a much lower heavy metal content than a lot of these powdered solutions people are trying to put into their gardens. So Keep that in mind, especially with the kelp. Kelp is a great product when used as directed, but if you overdose with it and you go crazy, you're absolutely going to have arsenic problems, and as well as boron problems as well. You'll have excess boron, which causes lockout as well. So it's not just the arsenic I'm talking about. You can cause other plant problems, especially with fruiting crops if you overdose with kelp. And then fish poop too. You got lots of people out there being like, fish poop has everything that plants need. You don't need to supplement. That's a bunch of bullshit. Um, and aquaponics, you have the pH needs to be adjusted, and we can use that in order to adjust our calcium and potassium by adjusting the pH at the same time. You also have iron. Remember, iron gets oxidized and not generated in an Fe2 form in an aquatic solution like aquaponics or hydroponics unless it's chelated. And you're not going to have that chelating agent, happening in the aquatic system live as it's happening. It doesn't work that way. You have to have an anaerobic zone in order to get the chelation to do it aquatically, like some of the work that Quan Con Pham did in Vietnam with some of the plant ferments, with which we're going to talk about a little later on in the presentation. You can do it then, but it has to be done in a separate side chamber and then added back into the system later on. You can't just do it in the system live. It doesn't work that way. Manganese is another one that has to be chelated or it's going to be broken down by the oxidation. And these are just two examples of many on things that require you to have some level of additional supplementation in aquaponics. Molybdenum is another one that gets stripped out 100% of the time when I test a new commercial or home aquaponic system. Molybdenum is zero, because there's no molybdenum in fish food, and it's not going to magically materialize from your system, unless your fish owns a philosopher's stone, in which case you should have your fish making you gold. You're not going to have these minerals just appear out of thin air into your system. So, make sure that you're properly supplementing trace minerals, iron, manganese, molybdenum in your aquaponic system, or even a hydroponic system. If you're doing organic hydro and doing plant ferments and FPJs and things like that, and fermented plant liquid IMOs, you're still going to have to occasionally at least adjust for things using those inputs, even if you don't want to go directly with mineral salts. All right, are you going to grow low nutrient requirement crops? Or are you going to grow high nutrient requirement crops? And what I mean by that is, you're going to grow lettuce and leafy greens, or you're going to grow stuff that requires fruiting and flowering, because they have very different nutrient requirements, and you would make a very different compost or soil mix or fertilizer plan for the fruiting crops compared to the leafy greens. Does your crops require mycelium to grow properly? If it does, you're going to need a soil layer. That's why we use things like dual root zone. If you guys have seen any of my other previous presentations on my aquaponics methodologies, we utilize a pot that has half soil in order to provide mycorrhizal fungi in aquaponic systems for crops that require it. Does the plant actively kill mycorrhizal fungi, which we're going to talk about, and I believe it's the next slide or two, about brassicas and things like that, and avoiding planting them with things that like mycorrhizas. You'd never plant like a broccoli next to a cannabis plant because the broccoli is going to kill the mycorrhizal fungi that the cannabis plant wants in order to produce terpenes, so I can get a strong cannabis plant. You should never be planting brassicas with your cannabis. Purslane is another one that's non-mycorrhizal, but it is not actively known to kill mycorrhizae the same way that brassicas do. Brassicas actually actively kill mycorrhizal fungi as part of an anti-competitor. Some oak trees will kill a lot of other fungi as well. That's why you often see them bare underneath. But there's many different things that cause allopathy and lelopathy. Does it require even root pressure to properly develop? So, for instance, if I grow a carrot or a beet in a hydrogen or lava rock type flood and drain system, it's going to have pits and grow in an unusual shape because it needs even root pressure to develop properly and give you that nice marketable shape. This can definitely be an issue if you're, have compacted soil even and you're trying to grow carrots. It's still going to be a problem, even if you're not doing hydroponics or aquaponics. And then, is the plant a heavy feeder or fruiting crop? Spinach and strawberries plow through iron at a much higher rate than many other crops. Strawberries also plow through calcium at a faster rate than a lot of other crops. Tomatoes plow through calcium at a pretty high rate. Peppers plow through calcium. So making sure you have an idea of the general nutrient requirements of your crops and making a little game plan for that can be very important. Brassicas got problems. People should not be using brassicas for FPJs. You should not be using brassicas for Jadam. You should not be using brassicas anywhere but their own garden bed. Put brassicas in their own dedicated garden bed because brassicas will actively kill mycorrhizal fungi. It's not even that they don't have any associated with them. You actually can get brassicas to associate with some mycorrhizal fungi with the introduction of trichoderma, but they actively produce an allopathy, which is a chemical that plants release to kill their neighbors so that they can get more sunlight via their root system. In fact, the state of California has a wonderful um, paper on garlic mustard that explains quite extensively the threat to the natural environment that brassicas pose when they're not in the native areas. So do not plant brassicas in anything but their own dedicated bed. Do not use them for teas, ferments, or compost. Just leave them to their own. You know, you can compost them in their own bed, but don't do anything other than that. I think people have gotten a little too gun ho with some of the co-planting stuff, and I've seen people having interesting problems over the years with co-planting with brassicas. So definitely one to avoid. Nutrient testing. You can find all the different test kits you need for your teas, ferments, whatnots. aptestkit.com. I publicly posted a whole spreadsheet that has every test kit you could ever want in there with sort of has all the different information on how many test kits per box, cost per test, every kind of heavy metal and over the counter nutrient that you'd want, everything from nitrogen to chromium and everything in between. So check that out if you're looking for a good free resource to figure out what to do to quantify your own data. It's a great solution. It's also available on my website, potentponics.com. Just click on Open Nutrient Project and then click Test Kits if you want to get to it manually. All right, so I do want to go backwards. So Lamote is and Hanna are honestly the best ones. Lamote has the most options for different tests. They're based out of Canada, if memory serves me correctly, or France. I forget which. I think it's Canada. And Hanna is awesome because Hanna's, if you're colorblind or you're teaching students who have color blindness, Hanna is wonderful because all of their stuff is a digital readout. It comes with a little refractometer that reads the color tables and everything on there. So if you're having color blindness, you have color issues, your students have color issues, Hanna Instruments really is the best solution for the price point, so that you can teach your students things without them having to rely on color comparison, because that can be very challenging. You remember, you know, a large percentage of the human population is some level of colorblind. What, 15%, 17% of the human population is somewhat colorblind, at least to some part of the spectrum. So that can be a great resource. And when I used to do aquariums before I even did cannabis, and aquaponics, we used to utilize Hanna's for people that had color blindness, taking care of the reef tanks and stuff like that. So definitely go to Milwaukee is great for, you know, hardware tests and things like that, pH and OR meters and stuff like that. Or for controllers, they have stuff that can automatically dose if your pH gets out of range. CChem is good, but tends to lean more towards saltwater stuff. But sometimes a lot of their tests work both in salt and fresh. Salifert, same deal. Milwaukee is great for hardware stuff. And then Blue Labs is pretty good. I had a great interview both with Milwaukee and Blue Labs on my podcast over the years. I actually used to work for Aquarium Pharmaceuticals once upon a time when I was a teenager in their lab in Pennsylvania, where they have a bunch of zombie fish. They maintain fish diseases in like zombie labs. So they have, like, you know, ick and flukes and all this other stuff cultivated so they can treat them. But they have to keep live cultures of all the diseases. So I used to do water changes on the diseased fish tanks. It was a interesting job, to say the least, for an aquarium keeper. Mineralization. So this is something that We're going to kind of lump together compost, teas, brews, ferments, extracts, as well as fish waste mineralization into this particular talk as far as points in this next section. So for the longer you brew your tea, ferment, whatever, mineralization of fish waste, the lower the nitrogen is going to be. So if you're looking, do a 1 to 3 day brew, you're looking at a much higher nitrogen level. So maybe better for vegetative growth, leafy greens, that type of stuff. And then do a 14-day or longer in order to burn off that nitrogen and then break it down much more thoroughly and give you something that's much better and more well-rounded for flowering crops or fruiting crops. So beginning of the season, you're going to want to do much more shorter brews and ferments and teas and things like that. And then the second half of the season, you're going to want to extend that to much longer. And it maximizes microbial count. You can add things like, I'm a big fan of adding IMO. So I'll just go grab a scoop of IMO 2 or IMO 4, depending on which, step I'm at and which farm I'm at, and toss it right into my brew tank. If I'm making compost tea or mineralizing fish waste, either way, I'll toss it in there just to add more microbial diversity. Because what does that do? It adds more minerals to my system. It also helps fill in some of the gaps that you have from your food web if you're missing any. In general, I try not to put anything higher than about 1,400 parts per million on my plants from the brews. I will go up to 1,600 if it's, particularly good, but in general, try to, keep it below that, 1,500 parts per million range. And I'm using a Blue Labs Guardian to measure that. You don't have to really worry about that too much, but you can burn your plants if you go super crazy and get above 2,000. All right, mineralization. So again, leafy greens, earlier part of the grow season, 1 to 3 day brew cycle, 24 to 72 hour brew cycle is going to be what you're dialed in for. And then for the second half of the grow season, or you want something with a lot less nitrogen because you're not trying to push growth as much as you are flowering, fruiting stuff, you're going to go for that 14 to 21 day brew cycle for your teas, brews, ferments, etc. As you can see here, this is how we brew our fish waste. Now, you can do this with any animal waste, but this works particularly good with fish waste because it tends not to have too many bad pathogens in it that you might not want to propagate. We fill up our tank about a third of the way, which you can see here in our diagram. We then brew it with our air stones that would be in the bottom of this diagram here, and then shut that off for 2 hours. Let all the solids settle to the bottom, and then just open our valve up and allow that to drain off with just our clean, clear, mineralized water. And that's a great way to kind of continue to utilize, fish waste from your pond or your aquarium or your, aquaponic system that you've separated off, and then brew it for your garden use. Some of the stuff you can do with the leftovers of that is you can feed it to your earthworms. This is our bins from a place in San Francisco that used to run their nutrients for a large commercial aquaponics facility that the owner was arrested at January 6th back in 2020. So yeah, we're not best of buds anymore. For obvious reasons. I don't feel like I'm on enough lists. I don't need to be on the FBI's as well, So we took all of our leftover solids and plant roots and plant trimmings from our plants, fed them into these modified vegetable harvest bins that we have drain lines on the bottom of. We can collect all the juice off of these, as well as from the worm juice. And then also gives us a place to put that kind of leftover material that doesn't break all the way down when we do our plant brews and our mineral fish waste brews. And just kind of gives us a way to kind of finish that off and finish breaking it down into a very rich vermicompost. And per 7,000 square foot of aquaponic production, you can generate around 2,000 pounds of fresh vermicompost per year in terms of volume and weight. Another one that I'm a big fan of, and people don't talk about, people don't think of lactobacillus this way, but they should, is doing ferments with them. Lactobacillus is great for plant ferments for unlocking bioavailable nutrients. And you can things like beets are awesome for potassium and phosphorus. Stinging nettle, like up in the top right, one of the best ones for trace minerals, molybdenum, manganese, iron, all of your zinc, copper, all the ones that you'd normally be like, man, where am I going to get that from? That maybe even ones that you would normally get from kelp. Stinging nettle is amazing. It also tastes great if you blanch it and cook it with your spinach. Tastes awesome. Mix it with some if you're gonna make pesto with it, do your oregano and your or no, not oregano, nasturtium, stinging nettle, and then your basil to make the ultimate pesto. I guarantee you, it'll be the best pesto you ever had. Purslane is another good one. It gets deep, deep in the ground. I know we talked a little bit about not using it so much in the garden because it's not a mycorrhizal plant, but it doesn't have an allopathy that actively kills nearby plants the way that brassicas do. So it will pull minerals up from deep into the earth. I remember, why you see that plant in a driveway or in a parking lot? Because it has roots that can go 30 feet underground. It has some of the deepest roots of any plant that is in, normal city landscape. So it pulls minerals from deep, deep underground to the surface and into its plant tissue where you can utilize it to make teas and ferments. One of the other things that's really nice for lactobacillus fermentation is adding horsetail, because horsetail actually has a compound in it that reduces vitamin B uptake by the plants. And by adding lactobacillus to horsetail to lactobacillus produces a lot of vitamin B. So it kind of helps counteract that normal slight growth reduction that horsetail can cause. Cannabis leaves, we have to prune them off and destroy them legally for the cannabis in most states. And we have to weigh the amount of fan leaves that we prune off and destroy them according to a acceptable protocol by the state, so that we're not quote unquote selling leaves for people to get high because they don't understand how the system works with cannabis. We ferment them and turn them back into plant food. Because why waste all that? We spend all that time and energy and money to grow that biomass. Might as well turn it back into fertilizer. And then comfrey is another wonderful one that does really well in lactobacillus ferments. So, you make up your normal lactobacillus batch and then, toss quite a bit of plant material in there and let it rip. And here's the recipe for it. I won't read it off line by line, but you have the instruction manual here for you to go ahead and go crazy if you want to. I also like to add a small amount of kelp extract. I find the auxins help accelerate things a little bit when in terms of plant uptake. So you can do it without the kelp extract. It's not required, but just get a slightly better increase in parts per million uptake of the minerals if you do add it with the extra auxins added from the kelp extract. Other things that if any of you guys have seen my talks before, this is one of my favorite things to make here, which is we call it blue goo. But it's a phycocyanin isolate that we make from spirulina and kelp using lactobacillus. So you can actually isolate, grow compounds that can give you really awesome results in your garden by fermenting them with lactobacillus or other specific microbial colonies. So this is an example of taking a pound of spirulina, about a quarter pound of kelp, and 4 gallons of milk and a starter culture of lactobacillus, and then allowing that to brew up. And the lactobacillus separates the phycocyanin, which is your main building block for chlorophyll A through E. The most energy intensive, or one of the most energy intensive molecules for the plants to produce, and gives it to them via the root system or through the foliar uptake. So depending on how you apply it. So it's a great thing for bringing plants back from, heavy damage from insects or wind damage, hailstorms, that type of stuff. It'll make them bounce back very quickly. So definitely something that, hey, you can find out other cool stuff. I happen to come across this recipe and figure it out and tweak it to get it to dial it in. This actually started off as an accident, accidentally spilling spirulina into a batch of labs I was making, and then turned out neon blue, and started to work backwards. What the heck is this blue compound that's in here? And then kind of figuring out what it was through a little bit of chemistry work, and then going back and then tweaking the design to be a little bit better for commercial production. in terms of the recipe from that original screw up, and then coming to a solution now that is now widely used by a huge. I mean, I get at least a message every week or two of somebody else showing me their batch, and it's used by thousands of people now, all because of an accident. We're talking with my hands too much and knocking the spirulina into the bucket. So you never know what you'll come up with when you're starting to experiment. And you can check out all different types of other options over opennutrientproject.com, or go to potentponics.com, click on Open Nutrient Project. We have lots of other experimental stuff on there you can check out. So IMO, we're going to talk a little about plant ferments using liquid IMO. We're going to quick walk you through IMO. If you guys are familiar with green natural farming, you already know about this. If not, definitely be sure to check out our good friend Chris Trump. He has a lot of great videos on IMO that are better than mine. And I believe Matt also has some info out as well on IMO now. But I haven't watched all of the stuff yet. I've been quite busy with a new baby and stuff like that. So it's been eating my time up to stay current with everyone's content production, but I'm sure he has one as well. Um, IMO is collecting rice and fungi, mostly saprophytic fungi, but some other things as well, onto rice collections, and then utilizing the microbial collections from the local forest in order to better utilize the soil food web in your own garden. So in IMO 1, you're going to put out boxes of cooked rice out into the forest and collect all of the fungi and other things that will benefit your plants. Once it's fully colonized, we are going to mix it with equal parts sugar until we get this wonderful mix here. And then we utilize that in order to fully mineralize our system. So we can take this and brew it into a liquid IMO for 24 hours in order to fill in any of the gaps. Now we add in IMO to my aquaponic systems, alternating 1 week IMO, 1 week with lactobacillus. So, definitely something that you should be doing regularly. It should look nice and white. If it's all different funky colors, it's definitely a sign that you did something wrong. Just toss that batch out into the corner of your yard where, nothing lives, or, whatever. And ignore it and then just do another collection. I generally do about 10 to 12 collections at a time. When I do my collections, I find that this way ensures that I'm going to get 3 to 5 that are good collections. Sometimes you get better than that, but you're going to have at minimum 3 to 5 good collections that you can continue your process with from there. Also, now, me personally, if you guys, and you can check out my YouTube channel, I have a whole video on IPMO, and I've spoken about it previously at Matt's conference here as well. But I do about a third of this as insect frass now. And then the other 2/3 as rice. So I'll do about 300 grams of insect frass to 700 grams of rice in order to get a biodiversity that's more targeted towards also including chitinase producing microbes that feed on insect exoskeletons. It also helps with like a IPM type thing where it'll kill off the insects as well. So I use that in place of standard IMO these days, but that's more of a personal choice on my behalf. I find that it just works a little better, but you might want to try this first because it is the more traditional way before getting down that rabbit hole. So liquid IMO, like we talked about, is made from taking your sugar stabilized fungal collections. Now, the reason why we put the sugar in here equal parts, so we'll call this 1.5 kilos and 1.5 kilos of sugar. The reason why we mix these together to lock out the oxygen. When the sugar is in contact with the fungi, it locks the oxygen out, which means the mushrooms go back to like a spore state, and a lot of the bacteria and protozoas and all the other things go back to a spore state from that lack of oxygen, meaning we can wake them back up and brew them into an oxygen-rich environment, and they'll start breeding again. So we can kind of shelf-stabilize that collection so that a collection doesn't last just a few days. And that's the reason for doing that. Now we're going to go ahead and brew our tea up. So we're going to take a cup of the sugar mix and throw it in a 5-gallon bucket with air stones, brew it up overnight, and then go ahead and apply it. And that'll give you incredible root growth. If you're doing an aquaponic system, you can add it to your MBBR. If you're doing compost teas and things like that, or jadams, and you're going to brew them up before application, just toss a cup in there as well. It'll just help your biodiversity and help you with your mineralization as well. So fermented plant liquid indigenous microorganisms. So this is the process of taking that liquid IMO and then adding new plant material to it every 2 to 3 weeks. And you can or even lay it longer than that, but basically once it starts to break down into a liquid, you add more. So you're going to take like a 55-gallon drum, you're going to fill it up, approximately about a 25 to 30% of the way with plant material, fill it all the rest of the way up with IMO until it's about 85% of the way full. And then every 30 to 45 days, or, every 14 to 45 days, depending on what plant material you're using. If you're using thinner plant material, it's not as woody, it'll break down faster, so you can add it more often. If it's something a little woodier or more, lignin and cellulose content, it's going to take a little bit longer to break down. So then you go towards it every 30 to 45 days. And then you're going to keep that aerated the whole time that you're doing this, and then add more plant material and add more plant material each time you do that. You're increasing the total parts per million levels of those nutrients. Now you can get, after 90 days, you're going to have a plant material that's organic, that's in a liquid solution, that's equivalent to the parts per million of many of the off the store shelf that you would get from Athena or from General Hydro or any of those other people, in terms of iron content, calcium, potassium, manganese. This is how, if you want to do a true one-to-one replacement that's organic, this is the way to do it. And we have an AI that we have at the end of the presentation that actually does all this for you. We took a bunch of examples on what this broke down into, and it knows all the plants around the world, where you're at, the general nutrient content of them, and it can build formulations and instruction sets for you for these types of nutrient formulations that to match individual plants' needs. But it all started with the work of Quan Con Pham in Vietnam, who was trying to find a way to supplement iron and potassium and a couple of other things in his aquaponic systems. And he started fermenting banana tree husks and banana hearts, bamboo, and a couple of other things, bamboo shoots and some other stuff. And then doing this liquid IMO fermentation over time and building it up over time to then create nutrient solutions that were equivalent to, hydroponic type solutions that they can be added back, that are completely organic and based off of inputs from your own property, right? You don't need to go buy anything but rice and sugar to make these and then harvest the plants on your property. I was in Zimbabwe, right? The country with the highest inflation rate in the history of the planet. And we still were able to afford this and do that there. I just came back from Thailand, again, one of the least well-off countries in terms of agricultural spending per farm. No problem doing a lot of these different things. And they have lots of other awesome solutions that they've developed over there as well, that they can utilize things that are on their property, or microbial collections from their own properties as well, that are separate from this particular work. But this is something that I really feel like people need to spend more time on, and really need to emphasize more, and really need to think about as a true solution for people in low income areas, as a way to revitalize their properties. They have all this wealth of nutrients and fertilizer on their properties, but they don't know how to make it. And it can be a faster way to get there than composting for 12 months or a year, or 2 or 3 years, or some of the other, just, they're awesome and they're great regenerative permaculture methods, but farmers ain't got time for that. They need something that works quick and they can do in the off season, right? So this gives them an option that's much cheaper, doesn't require all the waiting, and can be done in the off season, and when they're not worried about planting during the dry season or whatever else. So it can be a great solution, and you can even do a nitrogen based one. He was doing fish in a liquid IMO solution, and getting something similar to an FAA after 2 weeks. I've found personally, if you are going to do FAA, use the IPMO as instead of IMO for your seed culture. A lot of times in traditional Korean natural farming, they tell you to use an IMO culture to seed the FAA in order to fermented fish amino acid in order to get the system going. It'll work in a month if you do it with IPMO. It greatly accelerates it. We did this a bunch in Thailand for our nitrogen sources. Nitrogen fertilizer is very expensive there, so we would just buy the cheap bycatch, go get the leftover, skeletons and stuff from the people at the market at the end of the day, and you can get a whole bunch for next to nothing. And it made a great ferment with the IPMO as the initial culture because it's better breaking down that calcium in the bone structure and the scales and stuff like that than the regular IMO is because it has those microbes in it from the chitin seed source from your original IMO collection because you have those insect skeletons in there that you're using for um, the initial collection. Feeding soil grows with aquaponics. You can see here on the left is soil fed with aquaponic water. On the right is the original base iron, rich, pretty clayish soil in Oklahoma. This is my buddy at Little River Aquaponics. You can look him up online on I know he's on Instagram. I don't know if they have a website, but they do vegetables and cannabis and koi at their farm there in Norman, and you can check them out. But they had a great results with their soil restoration project for their outdoor vegetable gardens and cannabis grows in the outdoor area. Aside from their greenhouses, they were able to create wonderful soil that looks and is richer than any of the surrounding soil is. Yeah, so here's an example. We did touch on this earlier. Somehow this ended up out of sequence, but you can see the spreadsheet that we have with links to everything you could possibly want that we had earlier. Heavy metal problems. Again, we talked about this. This is an example of a plant that was 4 times the legal limit of arsenic. And again, this was traced back to Maxicrop plus iron being heavily overdosed. It's not that that's a bad product. They're a great product when used as directed. But if you overdose it, well, that's a problem. Definitely something to be concerned about, especially with organic gardeners. Be careful. There's a lot of shysters out there that'll just sell you anything organic and come up with a solution, nutrient solution that is organic certified or OMRI certified, but they're not balancing it at all for heavy metals, or they're not looking at the long-term bioaccumulation of what they're adding, or some other thing that they're missing. So definitely something to be careful with. I've had to clean up after Symbiotic Aquaponics in particular is a company that has just been a disaster in the cannabis industry, where I've had to go from farm to farm cleaning up their messes in multiple states now. So when people fail for compliance, they go to people that actually have been doing this for a while. So definitely something to look out for. And I'm sure there's soil people that have done the same thing either without knowing it, with good intentions. But you got to know this stuff if you're telling other people to do it, or you really don't know what you're doing. All right, so mold and fungal control prevention. There's lots of different biocontrols options for fungals and molds. These oftentimes don't require some of the same licensing that a lot of your pesticides do. Most of them are pretty benign compared to licensing. I highly recommend anyone that's getting serious with about any kind of decent sized garden to go and just go get the pesticide applicator's license. Most states, it's like very cheap. It'll help you, CYA if you have a problem. It'll also, help you learn a little bit more about, proper PPE and things like that. So definitely something to highly recommended that people do. Again, it's not very expensive. It's like go to a Saturday and spend like 3 hours sitting through a course and fill out the little questionnaire at the end, and as long as you pass, you're good, right? It's not very difficult in most markets. Some markets a little bit more difficult, but for the most part, that's a very easy certification to get. Cannabis industry whitelists are also a great place to look. If you don't know the answer, most states spell out exactly what's allowed on cannabis for fungal and insect applications. So just use them as a cheat sheet, right? Like if you're a tomato grower or pepper grower and you don't know what's up, that's going to be a great option for you to go and look. Oh, what do the cannabis guys use? Because you're not going to use anything that doesn't work because it's an expensive crop. Um, that's going to be a great option for you to check out. If you're totally left without a clue as to what to apply, that might be safe. And remember that cannabis whitelists as well from different states also account for combustion, so they're held to a higher standard than most organic certifications are. So that's why they're also a great resource for people that are even non-cannabis growers. Humidity and airflow are extremely important in preventing fungal and mold issues as well as edema. You see edema quite often in orchids and Nepenthes plants, pitcher plants, from lack of airflow and you know, and lack of magnesium generally. Um, these can be easily mitigated by just giving your plants a little more fans, a few more fans, or a little bit better airflow, or just simply changing the angle of your fans so they have a little bit of crossover. Can really, really help reduce that. Also prevents fungal mold spores from landing and colonizing a leaf surface as well. Um, Probiotic prevention is the best way. Again, if you're applying stuff once a week, every other week, you're not going to have problems with molds and funguses, especially if you have your root system all dialed in. If you have a properly diverse soil-based garden or aquaponic garden, it's highly diverse and microbiology, you're not going to have problems with mold and fungus. All right, so Lactobacillus serum. This is basically taking kefir or naturally collected lactobacillus off of rice wash and brewing that and call into a concentrated form that allows you to apply it to your plants, either foliarly or to the root zone. And this is a great way to get rid of powdery mildew, botrytis, fusarium, things like that. It also is a good way to prevent and eliminate Pythium, E. coli, and Salmonella from aquaponic and hydroponic systems. And in fact, I would be shocked if in 5 or 10 years from now this wasn't required for all aquaponic food production because it does such a good job at eliminating it. We've 3 separate times now we've eliminated E. coli from aquaponic systems. Non-human pathogenic E. coli, but it did set off the normal tests. They do test, for waterborne pathogens, and while it isn't directly one that would infect a human, it is close enough to where it shows up as a false positive. So we have completely eliminated that within 21 days each time that we've applied that within 3 weeks, just by acting lactobacillus at a 1 to 800 rate. So 1 gallon of labs for every 800 gallons of aquaponic system volume, without any type of negative issue. We didn't have to recycle the nitrogen in the system. We didn't have to bring the system offline. I didn't have to bleach it. I didn't have to clean it manually. All we did was add the microbes and let them fix the problem. And it completely solved the issue. And again, it should be emphasized. Anyone doing liquid culture, either hydroponics or aquaponics, should be adding lactobacillus at a 1 to 1,000 rate every other week for food safety as part of their protocol, because it will completely eliminate any of these foodborne issues that people run into, short of someone actually contaminating the crop at time of harvest. Obviously, if they have dirty hands or something came out of the bathroom, yeah, they can introduce it to the crop they just harvested, but you're not going to have it in your system. And can be sourced from many different ways. You can do traditional rice wash. You can also just go get kefir and at your local grocery store, or even non-flavored yogurt, and start it that way. You can get super lactobacillus probiotic from your local pharmacy. You go to the pharmacy and ask them, hey, I just had antibiotics, I need probiotics. They'll go get you a bottle of this in the back. Now it's not prescription, but they do store it behind the counter in a refrigerator. So be sure to go ask for it. If you're in the middle of the city, I live in downtown LA. You're not going to want a rice collection that's air collected, right? That's not going to be very healthy or clean. So this gives you a good alternative. EM1 also is a lactobacillus culture, and it's good for treating powdery mildew, botrytis, fusarium, pythium, septoria. Great for treating septoria as well. You hit it three applications with labs and three applications of liquid IMO, and your Septoria is gone. People will tell you, oh, Septoria stays in the soil for years. Only if you don't treat the soil. If you treat the soil with microbes, it goes away. You can even reverse infected plants. I've done it at 400 acre scale. I mean, it's not the death sentence that everyone makes it out to be. I think it is if you use traditional chemical ag. Yeah, you're not going to solve it. But if you use probiotic, microbial biosolutions, you absolutely can treat it and then prevent it from happening in the future. But if you put down a good amount of liquid IMO or even solid IMO at the beginning of your season, you're not going to have this problem. Septoria, Pythium, Botrytis, Fusarium, all are stuff that colonizes the roots first for the most part. So you're not going to have those issues if you have enough biodiversity to eliminate them in the first place from your soil, or at the very least keep them in check. Because remember, Fusarium is in many cases, an endophyte as well, and is naturally present in a non-pathogenic form in many crops. So just because you see a microbe colonizing your plant and killing it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not normally supposed to be there. It's just in a much different population level where it's non-pathogenic. That's something else you don't really have people talk about too much with Fusarium in particular. Um, Here's your lactobacillus recipe. Again, I'm not going to read it, but here's your instruction manual if you want to go ahead and do that. And the other thing I wanted to emphasize with lactobacillus is vary your seed culture. So I like to get a couple different kefir greens sources from Amazon or what XYZ hippie website and add that to my rice wash. Now I still like to do rice wash when I'm in a clean area because it adds yeasts as well. You're not going to get hardly any yeasts if you just go with the kefir. So you're going to be able to get some yeasts and some lactobacillus with the rice wash collection compared to your kefir grain or pill form, depending on which seed culture you're using alone. Bacillus subtilis, you can see here. This is another great option for fungal treatments. Cease up here is kind of my go-to. Cease is kind of like the better smelling commercial version of Serenade. Anyone that knows has used Serenade before, which is another Bacillus subtilis product, knows it smells like a high school boy's locker room. It smells like sweat and BO. So not the best product to use in a commercial facility. So Cease is the better smelling option. It still has a bit of a funk to it, but nothing like the ready to use Serenade does. And there's many different strains here of Bacillus subtilis and that you can choose from, and alternating them sometimes can help as well, because remember that the slightly different versions can help quite a bit. And by mixing them as well can improve. Sorry, I keep sneezing. Can improve efficacy, and we'll talk about that a little later on in our presentation. This is another one that I don't see people talk about as much, and it's a good product that, whatever reason, doesn't seem to be quite as well known. But Ulcladium omanis, mansi, is a wonderful little bacteria that loves to feed on um, botrytis and sclerotia. So I know a lot of people with vegetables, leafy greens, strawberries, tomatoes really struggle with botrytis, and this stuff works really good, which is why I chose it. And I have a whole slew of toolbox options for your biocontrols if you take any of my pest control course, my aquaponic master course, or my cannabis course. We cover the full gamut of them. We cover over a dozen for each thing. So there's quite a few out there that people don't realize that are on the market that are legal in the United States that are not really readily utilized as much, or at least talked about as much in the home gardener sense. So I figured I'd touch on this because it's something I see people struggle with a lot. And then insects. So insects can be quite a challenge. It's important to know like what insects have certain seasons. So like in Jamaica, butterfly season is in May, and we get tons of caterpillars and tons of butterflies everywhere. Or if I'm in most of the lower 48, you're going to have aphids in the springtime, much more than you would say in the second half of the summer, where they can be an issue, but you're not going to see a big aphid outbreak in July when it's 105 out. You know what I mean? Because the grow conditions are just not right for them to have a breakout, population explosion. So learning what it is that's going to affect you in different times of the year so you can kind of better prepare for them is important. Making sure that you kill beetle larvae if you're doing soil farming in the wintertime with things like BT Galleria or putting Escherichia fumariaceae or Bavaria bassiana into the soil can really help eliminate them over the winter so that those larvae do not come back if they did affect your crops earlier in the season. There's even viral biocontrols that are out there now for things like bolo worm and some of the others that can be a big issue for larger scale farming that are viruses now that are weaponized to be utilized by farmers. And I think that you don't really hear people talking about them as much, but that's some of the stuff that's coming down the pipeline is or we're getting a wider range of biocontrol options in the very near future to fight off a lot of the stuff that's been traditionally kind of hard. Making sure you properly ID your insects is also important. A lot of times people will get the wrong ID and then go for a biocontrol like a beneficial insect, and then suddenly, oh, well, it's not eating it. Oh, yeah, well, it's because it's not normally eating that. You got the wrong thing, the wrong solution for the wrong problem. So that can be a problem for many people that is often unaddressed. Again, just to touch on our AI that we built with copyleft cultivars, we do have a full IPM suite in there as well. It tells you how many beneficial insects to release for your given square footage with your given crop, as well as full list of biocontrols if you would rather do, fungals or bacteria to wipe them out instead. And we'll talk about that at the very end. And then really good biosecurity, if you have a greenhouse or an indoor building, should prevent insects entirely. You shouldn't have any. You should just get rid of them before they come into the garden at all. Obviously, it's easier said than done, but the best solution is to just not let them near the plants in the first place. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things here. So this is Bavaria bassiana. My favorite strain of Bavaria bassiana is one that I do not hear people talk about enough is Velifer. Now, Velifer is the only strain of Bavaria bassiana that's also rated for spider mites in terms of products that have Bavaria bassiana. So definitely one to check out. It is not the cheapest stuff. It is very expensive. It is like 130 or 140 bucks a bottle unless you get a case of it. So not as cheap as some of the other options for Bavaria bassiana, but it has the best efficacy, especially for leaf hoppers and aphids in particular that heavily affect cannabis. It is very good. I remember leaf hoppers can spread bee curly top virus or leaf curly top virus, and can be quite destructive. Bavaria bassiana also kills over 250 different species. It's fish safe, amphibian safe. It can kill Persimilis if you're getting into the predatory mites. So be mindful of that. And then the other thing too is, well, we'll talk about it in the next slide. I forgot. So it's important to get the right strain of Bavaria bassiana for the right thing that you're fighting. So I'm going to use Velifer if I'm also fighting spider mites, which is Bavaria bassiana strain 5339. If I'm doing grasshoppers, and I have grasshoppers as well in my garden, I'm going to go with Bavaria bassiana GHA, which is grasshopper activated. Same thing with BT. They have a BT GHA, which is Bacterius thuringiensis grasshopper activated. If I'm doing boars and cucumbers, well, I'm going to want to get Bavaria bassiana Ant 03 because it's going to affect borers and cucumber beetles at a much heavier rate than the other ones do. If I'm in the EU and I need to worry about EU regulation, well, I might go with strain 147 EU. So making sure you match the product with what it is that you're targeting, even if it's Bavaria bassiana, can dramatically help you with avoiding legal issues if you're, using the wrong one in the wrong place, or B, um, uh, just, not wasting money on something that's not going to work for your targeted insect. So Isaria fumiceraceae, which is now called Cordyceps fumiceraceae, is primarily found in the products PFR97 and Ancora. This is a very similar compound to Beauveria bassiana. It kills hundreds of different types of insects, and can be combined with Beauveria bassiana at application. So you can do 50-50, or you can do a full blast dose of each, if you're fighting a particularly nasty outbreak or you don't know what insect it is that's attacking your stuff. Carpet bombing with a couple of these at the same time can A, reduce labor so you don't have to, apply it so often, and B, just give you instant better efficacy in terms of trying to give that initial knockback, which is a lot of times when you're using these spray pesticides like this, which again, they're fungal, there's nothing dangerous about them. Even though it says keep out of reach of children, if your kid eats it, it's going to get a stomach ache. It's not going to kill them. Uh, you're not trying to apply it, all the time. So by giving the plants a good knockback with this, and then letting your beneficial insects finish off any survivors, can be a great way to kind of beat back those bigger infections, and then provide a very good hunting grounds with just a few survivors left for your beneficial insects. So this is something we started to talk about earlier, but blending your strains can increase efficacy. So if I take and combine Velifer with Bioceres with Botanigard, and I mix those and brew them for 6 to 12 hours before application, I'm going to get a much better infection rate with things like lace bug, or with a leafhopper, or some of the other insects that typically semi-immune to Beauveria bassiana or have a very low efficacy rate against Beauveria bassiana suddenly get infected at a much higher rate because you have a hybrid strain. You get that hybrid vigor, and you get that better infection rate, with the combination of the different Beauveria bassiana strains. The other thing to mention, this is something that is not done in the product point in the United States because of legality issues, where you can only really get, in the United States, they're still hung up on monomolecular pharmacology. So you're in monomolecular everything because they're just, I don't know, stupid. Um, but you can combine these. In Asia and Thailand, I can get all these four of these products in one single application product. In fact, I can get five. I can get B. militarisum as well. That'll wipe out insects. But in the United States, you have to buy them individually, but there's nothing that says you can't combine them in application. So I'll add Beauveria bassiana with Isaria fumiceraceae, with Metarhizium, at the point of and with uh, I can't remember the name of it. It's a new, this Lecitech is a new, it's similar to Vera bassiana. It's a wide spectrum insect killer, but it's a fungi. And the name's escaping me at the moment because um, it's been a long day. So, but if I combine these for single application, well, now I'm wiping out everything that's on my plants in a single application rather than having to rotate and doing one every couple days. Well, that's good. Combining them and giving them a heavy nuke when you have a problem is also just as good, if not better, because getting less labor, better efficacy, and it just saves you a lot of time and effort. You don't hear people talk about it too much. Everyone's kind of paranoid about combining these, and these are perfectly fine to combine. They don't have any kind of negative impact on each other at application, and they're actually sold as combo products in Europe and in Asia. Well, I don't know about Europe, but I know they are in Asia, and Africa as well. You can get these combined products with the Beauveria bassiana, Metarhizium, and Isaria fumiceraceae in a single product. Things to avoid. UV sterilizers are occasionally recommended to get rid of pathogens in hydroponics or aquaponics systems. They lock out your iron, manganese, boron, blah, blah, blah. MBBR and AST filters, overpriced, completely useless. And if you have media beds in your system and you're doing aquatics, you already have more surface area than either one of those. So they're pointless. You're adding what 0.2% of the biomass or surface area for biomass uh, uh, compared to your media beds. It doesn't do anything. Water spinners, they'll change the political affiliation and gender of your water or whatever else they claim. Um, they're snake oil and they don't do anything. Same thing with structured water. If one more idiot tells me about structured water that isn't referring to ice, I swear I will scream. Kagan water, another one of those chemical scams that just basically creates bleach for you to put on your plants. It burns your plants, causes problems. Don't do it. Bat guano recently killed two people that were doing cannabis farming because they were breathing it in. And as it turns out, if you could check out my early episode with Kevin McKernan at the beginning of COVID, they went and sequenced a bunch of um, uh, bat guano off of store shelves and found a ton of live viruses in them. So, not very good stuff to keep around. I think, in general, the permaculture community should move away from bat guano. I think we've done enough pandemics for one lifetime. I don't know about you guys. I think we should try and steer away from that one. Um, and just because it's organic doesn't mean it's safe. Yucca extract will kill fish and amphibians within seconds if you add it to the water. So be careful. And again, like we talked about earlier, kelp. Kelp is a great product for your garden. If you overdose it, you're going to have arsenic problems. Here's our awesome AI that we built over copyleft cultivars. Like I said, this will build formulas for you in your garden. You put in the where you are in the world, or approximately where you are in the world, what crops you're growing, the size of the grow bed for the garden bed for each crop that you're growing, and then all or what part of the life stage you're trying to treat, and it will generate solutions. And it can also do just invasive plants. So say you want to just get rid of the invasive plants in your area or in your property, it can work with just invasive plants. It can work with native plants and non-invasive plants. It can work with a particular set of plants that you give it. And it also knows over 100 languages, so that you're not bound by oh well, all the Cree natural farming information is only in English. Well, not anymore. It's not. This translates everything. We're also constantly adding new methods and formulations to it for it to create things. It's actually creating new inputs. So it actually can create nutrient rich IMO4 and IMO5 that have plant inputs built into IMO3 and 4 to help increase the bioavailability of those nutrients while finishing off the IMO, and all kinds of other cool things that the AI has come up with that we've tested after the fact, and had amazing results. So definitely check it out. If you want to get an instant access to it, check out Copyleft Cultivars nonprofit on Patreon. You can sign up for free on there and get access to the free version, and then we do have a paid version that's a monthly subscription for people that are wanting the latest and greatest. That helps fund the progression of the app itself. We are totally funded by the handful of volunteers that are part of our group so far, as well as our Patreon supporters that have helped support us over the last year. We launched it around a year ago, and we've had incredible results with it. And we're working on some awesome improvements, such as photo identification for plants, so that you can make it simpler to identify plants for your fermentations and teas and inputs. Voice only for people that are non-literate. That's something that we realize is very important. So we're working on a version that you can just push a button and talk to your phone, and you don't need to worry about reading anything anymore. It'll just give you your instructions verbally, and that's going to help a lot of people, because 70% of the world's farmers aren't the best readers. So this can really help bridge a lot of gaps in information that allows people to unlock the wealth they already have on their property and better utilize the natural resources they already have on their property for pest control or for um, um, nutrient fermentation, or any other garden problem. And we have Vishnu Veda from India. We have green natural farming. We have soil food web preparations. We have all these different preparations from all these different backgrounds and methodologies that are publicly available, all fed into the hive mind of this, so they can kind of pick and choose what's going to be the best in your solution and your location in the world, based on the resources that are going to be, most easily available to you. And if you can't, say I go in there and I'm like, I don't have stinging nettle and I don't have horsetail on my property because somebody cut it all out a year ago, all these years ago. Well, that's great. You can just say, hey, I don't have those, and it'll give you replacements right away, and stuff like that. So it is very, very intuitive and very, very interactive, and can help you with a lot of different stuff. And I apologize about the phone stuff in the background. We have lots of fires going on in California, so um, my phone is being a bit cranky tonight. Here's our link to Copyleft Cultivars. If you are interested in being part of our team for Copyleft Cultivars, other with our AI tools, we have our Phyto Galaxy with all of the awesome stuff people registered already. Or if you're interested in Copyleft open source registration of plant genetics, be it cannabis, fruits, vegetables, trees, whatever. We also do open source registration through the blockchain of DNA sequences so that they cannot be patented, or bought up by Monsanto and that type of stuff by putting it into the public domain, utilizing a blockchain solution. This allows it to be on a public ledger for all time, until the EMP hits from the nearest star or whatever, and wipes out all technology. This will allow people to have those protections, and you can check out a ton of information about the awesome work Copyleft Cultivars does at copyleftcultivars.com. And that's actually how the AI came to be. Was we had all these farmers that we're working with. A lot of them are indigenous farmers all over the world, who wanted to register their stuff, but we needed a way to kind of help them with some of the other parts of their cultivation, or a way to help build awareness for the project that we're doing. And this seemed like a great solution. I had previously built out a lot of the back end of this as part of the Open Nutrient project to better figure out what the nutrient parts per millions were on different natural farming and traditional preparations, so that we could better quantify it against what we know in the Western salt-based world, to try and merge those worlds together. And of that, got together with Caleb and the rest of the awesome team, Maria, who is a wonderful talk as well on Copyleft Cultivars, that you can check out as well. And all the other team members, there's names I don't know if they want mentioned publicly or not, but have really helped build an incredible tool for farmers. And you can check that out at Copyleft Cultivars on Patreon or copyleftcultivars.com. You can check out myself over at Going with Fishes podcast. I'm on pretty much everything at this point: Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, all the things. We'll be back again this year with a whole bunch of awesome content. We're at 11 or 1200 hours or more of podcast content. So we have interviews with all kinds of different soil, microbe, fungal experts, aquaponic experts, cannabis experts, vegetable, fruit tree experts, you name it. We got an incredible depth of content in the podcast. And yeah, it's a wonderful resource, and it's free on pretty much every platform, audio and video. I do have a full-length aquaponic cannabis class where we cover everything there is to know, apmjclass.com, or you can check me out over on Teachable. Just type in aquaponic cannabis and Teachable, and we'll come up. We have a wonderful course. We cover everything from licensing, business applications, to microbes, inputs, nutrients, crop rotation, how to select cultivars, everything you can think of, with video footage from all over the world, many of the different grows that I've worked with over the years. You can check out as well, I have the aquaponic and living soil pest control course. I do have a big update I'm about to do on that. I have a whole new rewrite basically for a bunch of the controls that are about to add in the next few weeks. I have it all recorded. It's just editing it up and putting it into the masterclass and into this as well. So you definitely check that out. And if you already own it, be sure to check it out. We're going to have a big update. It's going to add quite a bit of new stuff, especially a lot of Asian microbes that we worked with in Thailand, with a bunch of updates and stuff on there. So check that out if you're looking for, organic and beneficial insect biocontrols for fungus and for your insect problems. And I have the new aquaponic masterclass. It is in release right now. We're trickling out, sections every few weeks for this, and this is the longest class that I've done so far. It's over 1,000 slides, tons of video content as well, tons of reference resources, dosing tables, release rates, anything you could think of. If it involves large scale commercial or home aquaponics. It's included in the course. It's the most comprehensive course in aquaponics that exists anywhere in the world. It is far beyond even any college course. I've taken 2 college courses in aquaponics now, or reviewed the course material, and we are just heads and tails above everything else by at least the magnitudes of 4 or 5 in terms of total data and data sets and crop diversity. We cover over 100 different crops, root crops, a whole bunch of stuff that is not covered by anybody else in aquaponics. So definitely check that out at aquaponicmasterclass.com. And you can check, sign up anytime, day or night. It's all available through Teachable. So it doesn't matter what time zone you're in or anything like that. You don't have to tune into a certain time. And if you have any questions and stuff like that, we do regular video replies, or I'll walk through course material and stuff, or I'll reply to you via email, depending on what's more appropriate or if I think everyone else will learn from it or not. And you can find out myself. Here's all my different resources, my courses. I'm DEMPure certified under Dragonfly Earth Medicine as well, as an educator. So you can check that out. You can email me at potentponics.com. Check out my podcast. I have a Facebook group, Aquaponic Cannabis Growers. Wherever it is you want to reach out to me, Instagram, wherever. I'm happy to help you with whatever, or if you're looking to take one of the courses, check them out. Helps me fund my research and fund new things that we can put out for information. So thanks for your time. Big thank you to Matt for putting on this awesome event, and I hope everybody there in Southern California is doing well, because it has not been a good week for that. So I hope everyone stays safe. Take care, everybody, and thank you for having me as part of the event.